All right. So, what's up, bows and bow ties? I'm sitting outside. It's kind of warm, but I wanted to get some sunlight. I feel like I need to deepen my tan. So, look, I want to talk about something that I ran across on TikTok. And so, the title of this is going to be is titled Black Suburbians Lack Community. For those of you out in podcast land, I should be running this through TikTok, but I forgot to set it up. I think it's running on TikTok. I don't know what I'm doing right now. Anyway, so look. I'm going to play a little bit of this clip, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause and then just give my thoughts on it, okay? Let me see what I'm doing here. Can I get myself together? Oh, where is it? All right. Sorry. I can't even see out here. It's so bright out here. This was probably not a good decision to do this. Okay, what am I doing? I can't see my cursor. Where's my cursor? All right. Here we go.
I'm just going to say it. Raising kids in the suburbs where you're the minority is some bull. And I get the goal is to have the best opportunities, the best school, the best education. But honestly, at what cost? Because while as a parent you're worrying about their academics and opportunities, kids just trying to fit in. And they're looking around for ways to connect to other kids. What do we have in common beside our address? Maybe it's
All right. So, let me just say this. I understand exactly what she's talking about. I have children who look like me, and they have friends who don't look like them. Um, and what I have found is, although they have a great set of friends, when you're in a community like this, where we live, and we were pursuing certain things, we wanted space, we want a larger plot so we can sprawl out, so they can get in the pool. We wanted them to be able to enjoy a good education without having to put them in private school, because if you put them in private school, then that further, I'm not against private school. I actually like private school, but the ones that are around here, I think when you start doing that, I think what happens is it's just further causing so much of a separation, more people who don't look like them. So, like I said, if certain opportunities fell in my lap, I would take advantage of it. But the purpose was to move here for really good schools. And when you come out to a place like in the suburbs where there's not many of you, I mean, there's a trade off, right? Because you don't want your children to be othered, but in the same token, you're like, I need to get them this opportunity. For those of you who don't know me, I lived in I would say upper crust, a pretty nice black neighborhood until we moved here. And that was by design. We wanted our kids to be around kids that looked like them. But and actually at the time when we did that, but then the schools were not that great, at least not in my opinion. My oldest went to the public school for about 3 or 4 months. And I was like, this isn't going to work. I sat in the classes. I've met with the principals. I was down at the Board of Education, all kinds of things. And so when we were in this relatively, I say this with earmarks, beside of my other thing here, affluent neighborhood, um, we saw things we still didn't like. We saw like there were parents who were more concerned about what they were wearing on their feet in the car that they drove, and they weren't interested in, hey, don't come out here. Just don't come on this side, okay? Because I'm filming. They were more concerned about those things versus making sure that their children were receiving a great education. So for people who, I just want to make sure I set the set the stage. So I don't want people to sit there and say, "Oh, well, you didn't contribute to." I wonder if that's my mother-in-law. Is that my mother-in-law? People are going to be like, "Oh, you didn't want to be around black people." I'm like, that's a negative. We were there for 9 years, but we saw things that we didn't like. We saw people were willing to sweep things under the rug, and by living in that black community at the time, and we were hoping to contribute to the tax base, but also keep our children around people who look like them. We found that we couldn't do it, and we tried for 9 years. We put our kids in a private school as well. We went to black churches. We did all those things. Our kids started off at a black private school, then we wound up going to a non-black private school. But like I said, my oldest was in the public school for a hot second. I found that when I would try to speak to administration and all these other things, and it was just I just could not make any moves. I could not get any headway. People were really secretive. There were so many things that were going on. I was like, I can't do this. My husband, he knew I was going to go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and he was like, okay, well, we'll put them in private school. But for 4 kids, that can get expensive. Okay. Now, We moved out here to the suburbs, different suburbs, with a bunch of people who don't look like us to take advantage of other opportunities. There was a trade-off there. So when this woman talks about how that there you just want your kids to just have a good life and take advantage of all these things to get the educational opportunities and stuff like that, I'm sorry that that's blocking here. I'm trying to figure out. Hey, I'll lean this way. Um, I understand where she's coming from because like it's like, man, you try so hard to do these things for your kids, but then there's something that might be missing. So let me go ahead and continue here.
Hair color or eye color. Maybe it's language. Maybe it's anime. Maybe it's gender or music. And that's all fine when they're young. But as they develop pre adolescence, when they start really seeing themselves and trying to figure out who they are or who they're becoming, it becomes a little more complicated.
Stop right there. Okay. So this is true. So let me just say this. When we first moved out here, so like my children was always involved in sports. My husband was always involved with them. We moved out here. My children became more involved in like soccer and lacrosse and that type of thing. Now, they're also still involved in basketball and football, stuff like that. But what was interesting was when we first moved out here, we were accused of trying to move our children to a place where they can play white sports, which was the most ignorant and stupid thing that you could say. One of the dumbest, most ignorant things that you could say. I was like, well, wait a second. You think we moved to put our kids in white sports? That's what you think? That's why we moved? I'm like, because we spent 9 years in the community. Okay, we spent 9 years contributing to the tax base, but noticing that the schools were just not getting any better. I actually personally went down to the Board of Education. I wanted to see the budget. I wanted to see all those things, and there was a lot of hocus pocus. You know, the county executive at that point has since, I think he has gone to jail and some other things like that for situations. But, you know, the parents were fighting me. They were more concerned about, they were like, oh, well, you got to put your kids. I'm like, no, I don't. See, these are the resources God has given us on loan, our children. Our children is our greatest resource here in America, but these are my children. And so I'm not going to use them as the sacrifice. And if people were engaging in shenanigans, it was just like so dumb. I was like, this isn't going to work. Now, this lady was talking about as they get older, you know, there's other things when they start to figure themselves out. Let me tell you something. My daughter is playing summer basketball, and the team that she happens to be on right now happens to look like her. And she's so full of pride and she's proud and she's smiling. And it's not that the team that she was on in the fall and the spring that she didn't like those girls. She got along with those girls great. Some of them were her classmates, etc. Right? She got along with them great. But there was something about when she joined this team and the girls were a little bit older. She's playing up, and those girls, nice girls, but let me tell you, the language, the camaraderie, it was different. I don't care what happens. They can tell those girls, okay, if you miss this, you're gonna have to do more running. My daughter is running with a smile on her face because she sees herself in these girls, and they're like a year or two older too. So she sees herself in these other young ladies. She's looking at how like it's something so simple as like how she can identify my hair. My daughter's wearing her hair braided right now. Like the girls showed up one time. Some of them just had a nice big beautiful ponytail or a big puff, and then maybe the next week they got long braids, right? But she can identify with that. She can identify with, you know, like when she's hearing some of the lingo, she's loving. And these girls are great, right? They're funny, like the humor is funny, and my daughter is enjoying this experience. And so I remember she said, Mom, I'm on a team with black girls. And sometimes I have to remind myself that it is important for my children to see other people like them. My daughter, and I'm using my daughter primarily as the example, not necessarily my boys. Although my boys, you can substitute my boys into these examples too. My daughter plays club lacrosse, and there are no black girls on her team. She's it. There's one other girl who's a minority, but she's my daughter's. That's it. And this morning, right before I came out here to do this live, we just happened to be there was a copy of USA Lacrosse. No, what is it called? Is it USA Lacrosse, the magazine? And she was reading up on Sammy White. You know, Northwestern won the championships this year, and Sammy White lives somewhere in the general area. And she was talking about how when she was watching in 2010 Towson had a black girl on their team or something like that, and so Sammy White basically said, "Hey, there's a black girl playing lacrosse." Well, obviously my daughter doesn't know anything about what happened in 2010. She wasn't born until a couple years later. But the point is, she saw Sammy White on the magazine and she's like, "Mom, this is a black girl." I was like, "Yes." I said, "And that's going to be you." The point is, this lady is talking about what happens when you take these black children and you're in the suburbs because you're desperately trying to provide for them an opportunity, and there's a trade-off. I want to continue this while I have a little bit of shade.
Because they start noticing certain dynamics and they start feeling marginalized. Always on the fray of a thing, but not in the mix of it. Sleepovers where other moms know each other better than your mom know any of the moms.
Okay, so I, as far as the sleepover, that portion thing, I don't think that's as much of an issue for my daughter because everybody pretty much knows. Hey, don't come down over here, okay? I'm live, so don't come past that point, okay? So my daughter doesn't deal with that portion, right? Because I already let a lot of people know I'm not about. Well, we're just starting to let her do a little bit of sleepovers, but I'm like, look, I don't care. And I think most of the parents know I'm not about like the craziness, right? Like I'm not caught up. But the funny thing is, because I'm not caught up, I get along with a lot of people, but I'm not caught up. At the end of the day, I'm all about trying to live my life. Man, I'm like, am I like pitting out under here? It's kind of warm. I'm all about living my life and making sure my daughter is protected. I'm talking about spiritually, physically, economically, financially, everything. And so, one of the things I'm mindful of is talking to her about discerning the environment she's around. But I have to also, as a parent, position her so that she's not in certain environments too. Now, I don't think most of the people that she's around are about shenanigans, but she is aware of certain things too. So I understand what she's saying as far as like when you get on these teams or when you're in these environments and you're making these friends, and as you get older and you have this age of awareness and you start to realize like, am I the other? Am I the black person? Am I the black friend? Like, or am I the friend? Like, you start to notice those things. Let's continue.
Because they hang out or they go to the same synagogue or the same church. And then there's the biases, conscious or unconscious.
Stop right there. I want to talk about this for a second. I don't want to make this long, but yet this seems like it's going to go a little bit lengthy today. There's a lot of biases that happen. And let me tell you, my daughter has become really good at calling out things. Oftentimes, I think people think because the intent wasn't bad, it's okay. And I'm like, I don't care about intent. The offense happened, right? So, for example, I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, she's so pretty," and I'm sitting there thinking, like, "Well, I know she's pretty because she came from me." But I think the thing is, like with my daughter, for example, when she would wear her hair braided, and girls would want to come up and touch her hair. So my daughter is really good about, "Don't touch my hair." And I've told her, I said, "You are not a pet," because would they go up to other people and touch their hair? And so even though they were like, "But it's so pretty," I like it. I'm like, we don't do that. I've had to correct parents, I've had to correct children, but also my daughter has gotten good about taking agency in herself and calling out. So she may not know how to name it and call it an unconscious or subconscious bias or anything like that, or when people say certain things, but she's starting to recognize certain things. And so she'll call it out. You know, me in this mouth right here, I call out everything. I'm like, what does that mean? So they know not to try me. But anyway, let me continue.
I mean, your kid might be really good at the sport,
Mhm.
but the dads that hang out together kind of look alike, and
That's
so they tend to pick each other's kids as top kids on the team. Or your daughter or son never gets a solo in a dance performance, and you don't want to pull out the race card and say that's it.
Yep.
But you might feel it in the pit of your stomach, though.
Yep.
And if you don't have a community for your child, the struggle is real.
Yes, let me tell you something. So when she went to this basketball team, the reason why I keep using my daughter is just because she notices things probably more so than my other children. Although they've mentioned things about like, oh, it's cool. I get to see another black kid, right? But my daughter is so much more intuitive. When when we went to this other basketball team and she's on this team with these young black ladies, um, it wasn't so much that like I mean, I don't know. I assume they're going to be pretty good. They seem like they've got some good foundation. But I think the biggest thing was For whatever reason, she felt at home there. In this moment, this I think is what she needs. She's just excited to be around these other girls, and they're nice girls, and they are funny when you listen to them talk up on the side. Because girls are funny, but she's getting that other side. She's getting like just some of the humor and the lingo, and she's loving it. She's so happy. And so when I think about that type of thing, and I'm like, okay, this is what she needs. Now, granted, a lot of these girls live in the suburbs too, but because I cross county lines, even though I'm only like 10 minutes outside of the city, 5 minutes, depending on which part of the county line, I'm in a technically different county. So where we are, it is different. So it was interesting when she went to this team with the black basketball players, and she, they were like, "Where the heck is it that you live?" And my daughter told them, and they were like, "Oh, is that the place where all the white people live?" And blah blah blah. And so she was like, "Yeah." She was almost embarrassed. I don't want her to be embarrassed about where she lives, but what I'm saying is, she was just kind of like, "Man, I live out in a place where there's not a whole lot of people who look like me, and where I am represented. And now I get to go to this team, and although they come from the suburbs too, different counties, whatever, there it's just different." And they have more diversity where they live. And so she is just really, really enjoying this moment right now.
because they really feel alone, fighting for their lives, trying to figure out who they are. Self loathing starts. They just want to fit in. One of the things I noticed is when I went back home to the hood, and yeah, the area looks depressing, the buildings are dilapidated or whatever, but going into the store, there is a real sense of community amongst my own that I didn't notice before. Like the way that we just organically talk to each other in the aisles, calling each other baby, ma'am, sir, honey.
Yes, I want to speak to that for a second. So when I had my children volunteering at the local food pantry a few years back, and it was at a church, and this church is an all-white church. And I remember they were talking about, "Hey, are you guys members at this church?" And I said, "No, we're not." And they're like, "Why not? You guys are here all the time. We have a great children's program, blah, blah, blah." I said, "One, you're Methodist and we're Baptist. Not that that's really, you should be focused on Christianity versus denomination." But I said, "But two," I said, "I have black children." And the lady looked at me genuinely confused. And she said, "Well, but what does that have to do with anything? We're all brothers and sisters in Christ." And I said, "Well, I would expect you to view things that way. And, if we're looking at it in a pure sense, that is correct. However," I said, "I have children who need to see themselves reflected. They need to have a place where they feel safe." I said, "At the end of the day, how do you think Black people learn their traditions and some of their history? And it's through the Black church. So we're going to get a hallelujah. We're going to get that in. But, that's when where they're going to learn about Black Wall Street. Well, in the home too. Let me rephrase that. But they're going to hear our traditions on first Sunday when we've got communion. We tend to sing the old Andre Crouch song, The Blood. The blood that gives me strength for me way back on Calvary. The blood, you know what I'm talking about. No, don't judge my singing. So my kids, I told the lady, I said, "Well, how do you expect for them to see people that look like them? Not in this community. Where are they going to have that community?" And when they walk up into the church, they see the way kids look when they go into church and how they look well moisturized. you know, back when my daughter was younger, you had your little ponytails and the bobbles, right? Or they're like, "Hey, baby, it's so good to see you." And we don't go into our church as much. I mean, we've been doing it online, and that's a fault of ours. But the point I'm making was, at the time, I said they need to see people in places of authority and leadership, um, educators and that type of thing. They need to see that when they go to church, they have people who are educating them in Sunday school and children's church, and there are people who are educators and lawyers and doctors and stuff like that, and they're concentrated in one place. And they're trying to push for you to become educated and to know the Lord and to be able to fellowship with each other. I said, that's the reason why my children go to a church that's not here. Because where else are they going to get that community? And that lady looked at me like I was speaking in tongues. Hey, I had to call a thing a thing.
Like if my boys were walking around in the store in the hood, somebody else's mom is gonna call them baby. Baby, can you pick that up for me? Honey, can you get that over there? Ain't nobody in Wegmans calling my sons baby or honey.
I know, I know. And it's so funny because when I was growing up, like everyone was either Miss So and so or Aunt So and so. Now we know that they weren't our blood aunt, but they were. Like they were our aunties. Aunt so and so or Miss So and so. And so I know when I, whether it was with family or non-family members just growing up or in the churches or whatever, even when we did something wrong, like, baby, come here now. Why are you doing this? Now look, do you want me to tell your so and so? Now look, now you know I'll go tell so and so. Now stop, fix your so and so. You know what I mean? And you know what was so interesting, at least back in the day, like they instilled a sense of pride in us. Look at you looking all good. Just, people had you feeling like $1 million. But when you move out to a place in the suburbs and you don't have many people who look like you, and it's really difficult to be in community with other people. Nowadays you can't even say anything to anybody's kid. Now, since this is just a sidebar, this is totally anecdotal. I ran into one of my neighbor's kids, and you know how sometimes like kids like act like they don't know you. I called her up right, and I was like, "Don't act like you don't know me, because you know that we are neighbors. I know your mom, and we hang out sometimes at night or whatever." I'm like, "We're not doing this." I said, "Because I'm going to call you out in front of your friends." Now, I did it lovingly, but it was firm, right? Now, granted, she doesn't look like me, and she got herself together. She was like, "Hi, Miss So and So." I'm like, "Okay, have a good one." I mean, the point is, that is what I think my children are not getting that. Because when you move out into the suburbs and everyone is about mind your business, I see nothing, I hear nothing. You go to certain places and certain stores and everyone's like this. And the interactions are so superficial, like, oh, hi. I'm like, ciao. But anyway, let me go ahead and finish this out. Let me finish this up.
And it's a subtle thing, I get it, but it's connection and it builds a sense of community in ways that you don't even think about. Because if you're in mostly white spaces, white kids are getting that all day because they look like somebody else's son or daughter or nephew. And so they may be getting that kind of constant nurturing within their community from random strangers all the time. And so they're in a community that's constantly building their self esteem.
Well, I will say this. We talk about building self-esteem. I where's my pointer here, because it's hard to see. I hear the sign. I definitely check in with my children and I ask them what they see when they look in the mirror and what they think about themselves. I'm like, you're smart, right? You're a good looking kid, right? I think that you're a kind person. I check in with my daughter all the time. I asked my daughter yesterday, I said, do you think you're good looking? She was like, yeah. I was like, well, what do you like about yourself? She said, besides my great personality. I'm like, this child, she gets it from me. She's like, I'm a nice person. I love my hair. I love my eyebrows. I love my face. I love my legs. I love my body. I love everything about myself. I was like, well, okay, then we just go ahead and back on up. And she said, but I think I'm a nice person too. And I'm like, I love it. I love it. No mean girls here. I don't like mean girls. We want to be of good character. All right. Sorry.
Constantly encouraging them in some way. And I got a bone to pick with other black moms in these communities.
Speak
Like if
on
you're in the suburbs and there's about 3, 4 of us in a huge community, we're just peppered into the neighborhood. Why aren't we speaking to each other?
it.
What is with the wave and keep walking?
Let me tell you, I've had that happen before, and at first I was taken aback. I grew up in the suburbs most of my life. There's a small moment when we were not in the suburbs, but I don't know, it's so weird to me because at least when I was growing up though, like and like I said, I'm used to having family. I would go visit my family who didn't live in the suburbs, and I got that community and stuff. But when I was in the suburbs, there were the black people, at least when I was growing up, we did speak to each other. There was an understanding there. nowadays many of them, it's almost as if like they don't want to be found out that like they're an outsider. I'm like, newsflash, newsflash. But yeah, I do run across some of those types, whether it's at work or in the community. Now, I'm not saying everybody's like that, but the few that I do run across in the community, it's kind of like hit or miss. Some of them like, hey, what's going on? Or when I see people at like a lacrosse game, like, because, like you have competing clubs, even though you don't live that far from each other. Like when I see like the other black parents or whatever, not many, like one or two, we always speak. But that's not indicative of other people when you're living in a suburb, depending on how diverse your suburbs are, right? If you're really lacking in diversity, the few that are there, I think they don't want to be associated. That's some weirdness. That's some anti-blackness. But yeah, I know exactly what she's talking about. That walking by and not speaking things shouldn't be happening. Where's my pointer? Like this is a situation. Okay. If we do.
Because other ethnicities unapologetically get together in the playground, on the corners, start hanging out together. I think we're afraid to look like we're about to start an uprising.
Ah, so look, okay, that's about it. Let me see. All right, they're prepping to grill and stuff, so you can't see. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to put that out there because I think overall, the more we go on and on, at least maybe it's just where I am at. I don't know. I would love to hear other people's thoughts on this. I'm just finding that when you're out here in the community in 2023 or whatever in the 2000s, I feel like Black people are less willing to be in community with each other. It's almost as if like they're afraid the census is going to build up, and like she said, there's going to be an uprising. There's this running joke that I've always had, depending on what contract I was on. I always say, like, when the Black people would get together and we were talking, hee haw for a couple of minutes before we would disperse. We're like, okay, now the census is high. We have to disperse. And we would laugh because we got it. Well, I do think that that same sentiment, I think, exists within the suburbs in general. I think that people are afraid to be in community with people. And I think our children need it. I don't want to have to go network just to get my child into a Jack and Jill. I'm not interested in doing that, right? I mean, I'm not, you never say never. But the main thing is like, I just want, we should just be able to be in community with each other. We should just be able to recognize each other, say hello to each other, um, offer that sense of friendship with each other. Because the fact of the matter is, although you may have great relationships with people in the community that don't look like you still are this one of these people don't belong or whatever that song is. So I just look at it like that. I do what I can to protect my children, to protect my boys. Sometimes my boys they notice things like, oh, here's another Black kid, and they want to chat with the kid. My son who's going to college, and he made sure that when he chose a college that um, he had plenty of Black kids there. That was important to him. Um, by the way, this is just a total anecdotal sidebar. My son got into the honors college, and I didn't even know until a few days ago because he doesn't read his email. And I was like, Kat, like, I need you to like know these things because that's like money, right? Like that's opportunity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this particular video. I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. I mean, I know it's not as salacious as talking about whatever's happening reality TV. I don't even know who half of these people are, these singers are that are beefing or we're not beefing. Or I don't know. I don't care. I didn't want to talk about anything gender war related. Maybe I will tomorrow. I don't know. I just wanted to just talk about like why we weren't in community with each other as much. And maybe where you are, maybe that environment, your suburbs is in community with each other, and that's great. Like I said, I have great ties within my community, but I just feel like when Black people get out there in these communities, we either don't have enough that affirms our children, or the few of us that are out here in these suburban streets, we are not affirming with each other. We're not in community with each other. We don't want to recognize each other, and it's really unfortunate. But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Let me know your thoughts. I know you guys get this spiel all the time, but definitely if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give a likes up because it sends a notice to the algorithm like the Black opinionated woman is amazing in every way and can do no wrong. Go ahead and subscribe. All right. Hey, thanks for hanging in there with me. Let me know your thoughts.